This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
On the eve of the inauguration of Donald Trump, the uncertainty surrounding this new U.S. president has caused much concern around the world. One of the biggest disturbances will likely be the shift of America's trade policy once Trump and his administration take over the White House. Based on Trump's support for Brexit and bilateral trade, the thrust behind his trade policy is becoming clear. His presidency will be dominated by protectionism. Trump's government will likely pursue his America First policy, especially in trade with China. To examine Trump's vision for world trade and its implications for the rest of the world, particularly for China, today I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Robert Coeb, Director of the Economist Corporate Network.
Donald Trump represents the ultimate populist non-politician who's about to assume the highest elected political office in the world's largest economy, arguably the most powerful position in the world. It's going to be a very interesting ride ahead. And also, Mr. He Weiwen, Senior Fellow with Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University.
Donald Trump's announced trade agenda will pose serious challenges, risks, and uncertainties in the months ahead, at least. But I don't think he will be able to change the fundamentals of U.S.-China trade, nor the global trade.
And we will also talk via satellite to the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Arantxa Gonzalez. And that's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zoe. Before we get started, let's take a look at this.
He is going to fight for American workers and American manufacturing.
As Donald Trump becomes the next U.S. president, his chief spokesman tells CGTN that will be Washington's guiding principle when it comes to global trade. But it doesn't mean the Trump administration wants to sacrifice access to the Chinese marketplace for small businesses at home. The U.S.-China Business Council says more than 2.5 million U.S. jobs depend on trade with China.
With respect to China alone, I mean, it's a huge marketplace for American workers and small businesses. You look at the commitment that Alibaba made the other day when they met with him, talking about increasing access to small businesses.
Yet ahead of Friday's inauguration, Beijing announced it was hiking trade penalties on U.S. grain exports. And after repeated promises by Trump to slap 45% tariffs on Chinese imports, some Chinese newspapers ran editorials calling for retaliation against Washington. China's Commerce Ministry, though, stressed it still intends to pursue dialogue with Washington over trade.
We are willing to work together with the U.S. new government to continue to push forward a stable and healthy development of economic and trade relationship between China and the U.S.
On Capitol Hill, Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin seemed to contradict Trump's call for tariffs.
I think one of the biggest problems in certain of our trade agreements is our American intellectual property is not being kept and is being taken in foreign countries.
Almost immediately upon taking office, Trump's spokesperson confirms Donald Trump will take key steps to reverse the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement and renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. And if his Trump team doesn't immediately get confirmed by the U.S. Senate, he will act alone. Jessica Stone, CGTN, Washington.
Let's talk about Trump's policy when he was sworn in. There are a lot of unknowns, uncertainties, but probably there's one known thing, that is Trump's trade policy will be more tough. He got to rip up all the trade deals with major trading partners. But how does his trade policy look like? Will he come up with consistent trade policies with other countries?
Consistent is not an adjective that people usually use for describing Donald Trump, at least in the way he articulates things. I would say that, though, to your point about him trading up existing trade agreements, that's very difficult to do. He has threatened it. He has threatened to, well, we can say this, he's not going to go for TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a big concern to China. And that's maybe good news for China in that regard.
Big concern for Japan.
Well, big concern for Japan, big concern for Australia, the other countries that were going to benefit from that. I would argue a big concern for America. I think it was a better deal for America than what we have with NAFTA. Now, will he go so far as to rip up NAFTA? That would be extremely problematic. I doubt that seriously, but he has talked that way.
But it seems Mr. Trump has confidence that he can have even better deals than the previous administrations. Where does his confidence come from?
The confidence comes from his success as a developer, but not as a president. It remains to be seen whether he can succeed. First of all, I think the most important challenge for Donald Trump regarding the global trade agreements is WTO. Unless United States quits WTO, it will be bound closely by all the international trade rules. They cannot.
But it seems he is in the mood to let alone any multilateral trade agreements, NAFTA, TPP, and WTO. All the trade agreements will be revoked.
They have to go through the procedures, to go through the Congress. And of course, TPP is not yet effective yet. It's not passed at the Congress, so there's quite another story. As far as NAFTA, they have to renegotiate, and both Canada and Mexico have agreed to renegotiate. We have to wait and see how the changes will happen.
And which country do you think he will first land it on to have a renegotiation with? Mexico, China, Europe?
Well, he doesn't seem to have as much in terms of issues with Europe in the EU. He does have a lot that he has complained about regarding Mexico and China. Those seem to be the two most vulnerable countries in terms of trade relations with the U.S. It would be those.
He keeps talking about America should have fair trade with the rest of the world. Not free trade, but fair trade. But there's no clear definition what fair trade looks like to him.
That's right.
What is in his mind as a fair trade mechanism?
I think
America wins everything? Is that possible?
Good point, actually. And I myself am an American, and looking at the way the campaign progressed and the election ended up, I think he has carried his message using that logic, that America is a victim of a so-called free trade system that isn't fair to Americans. So putting America first is in contrast to America being second or last. Therefore, it's a correction. It's not to really be a jingoistic, chauvinistic, America wins, you lose idea. But the tricky thing is here, how do you manage free trade? I mean, the WTO, as Professor Ho was mentioning, that was something America put forward. America had a lot of input on. Our relations with China, while not perfect, and I myself would say there are a number of areas I think we could improve and make it more fair for America. I don't agree that across the board China is a problem. I don't agree it's a currency manipulator, for example. So that will be interesting to see what he actually tries to put forward in regards to what he considers to be unfair trade with China.
And also let's look at the makeup of the people that he has chosen to make those negotiations. For example, the tycoons like his Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, Peter Navarro, the Trade Council Chairman, and also Trade Representative Michael Lighthizer. Those guys are very, very hardline trade promoters.
Navarro more than anyone, I would say.
Do you think they will be more effective in getting any kind of a trade deal that is more preferable to the United States than what they have already?
I'll make a quick comment. I'd be interested in Professor Ho's thoughts on that. Not really, no. To directly answer your question, Wilbur Ross is a well-known investor. He's also, like Trump, very contradictory in his record. He invested in mines that were then, the workers suffered under his ownership. There were strikes, there were issues. Peter Navarro is an economist who takes a very hardline, one-sided view on trade with China. He does make some valid points. I don't say it's all ridiculous, but this sort of death by China argument that he puts forward is really over the top. It's hyperbole. So when you have extremist views, whether left or right, populist or globalist, that's very hard to act on, and I just don't see the practical dimensions there yet. Wilbur Ross, among the people you mentioned, is probably the most experienced in actually doing things, and he has actually said some positive things about China, and tends to be more of a pro-China guy, even though he's made some negative comments too.
Mr. He, do you think when these people are talking to Chinese trade representatives, what kind of a picture will that?
I think we should pay special attention to the new trade representative, lightlizer. He has been so experienced. He used to be the deputy trade representative in the Reagan administration, and he succeeded in forcing Japan to accept automatic, voluntary auto export control.
Yeah.
Although it's not voluntary, he did it.
Well, yeah,
and
it was
also
forced-
he
forced
changed,
voluntary.
forced Japan, and also made a lot of good deals for America during his during the Reagan administration. So experienced, so we have to pay enough attention to him. And maybe Donald Trump thinks that this guy can have enough experience in dealing with China. So because he has the experience, and Peter Navarro has no executive experience.
No,
He's a scholar, a professor. Trade policy cannot be built on a book, although the book is excellent, we say, in the eye of Donald Trump. So we have to wait and see how the actual developments will evolve. And Wilbur Ross is very good at protecting the traditional industries, especially the steel automotives. So this is also the critical point in U.S.-China trade.
And there is one thing about possible trade wars between China and the U.S. One advisor attending the Davos Forum, Mr. Scaramucci, said that if there is a trade war between the United States and China, China will probably suffer more. So that's their leverage that probably can squeeze a better deal out of China. Do you think it is reasonable?
Well, there is a point there that if you look at the trade imbalance between the U.S. and China, there is, in terms of finished goods, that sort of physical trade going on, more at risk for China. So that's a valid point. At the same time, if you look at value chains and integrated manufacturing systems, it's much harder to make that argument. And so is the argument to say you're going to bring jobs back. Jobs haven't just been taken by China, they've been taken by the whole global system. And the bigger issue for America is training a workforce that's ready for the modern needs of an economy. By the way, it's also the big challenge for China. China, as it moves up the economic evolutionary ladder, it needs to advance its skill sets.
Let's talk about manufacturing job later. Mr. He, do you think China will suffer more from a trade war with the United States?
I don't think so. It's very difficult to articulate. I believe that the calculation came from the simple fact that China exported 3 times as much as the American exports to China. So in that share proportion, that China should suffer more. But we cannot do that in that simple way. For if China's export to the U.S. is cut, then Walmart will suffer. And Apple will suffer, and U.S.
American
consumers, large
American
consumers
farmers will suffer.
Farmers
Boeing will suffer.
and also the ports, longshoremen will suffer, and the retail sector and logistics sector will suffer. Of course, all the chain down.
When that happened, I think the American people will feel the pain. And will that translate to anything that persuade the politicians to think again?
That's a great what if, but yeah, I mean, history tends to indicate that politicians are very cognizant of how the population feels, and if that kind of pain emerges from Trump's policies, if he plans to retain power, or at least the Republican Party wants to, they would have to adjust.
And what do you think China will do?
I think China will not be in no hurry. We understand the situation. We just watch closely, but we want to keep dialogue, communicate with Donald Trump administration and his trade team. Then we prepare all the tools in our kit.
There are other people saying
Very
that
thorough.
already China has been reaching out to the transition team, have been talking to Trump people. Do you think they have basic understanding where this is headed, and they should do whatever possible to avoid a full-scale trade conflict?
I don't know, because I'm not involved in that contact. But my knowledge tells me that we are still very far from that target. We have to pay enough attention and work very hard to communicate with the Donald Trump team, because the methodologies and ways are, I believe, are completely different. We have to get together. And facts might be the best teacher. If we do some fighting, do something, and then both of us suffer, and then we'll realize on that day that we're better to sit together and do something better for both.
Let's talk a little bit about China's suffer. what sectors do you think China will suffer the most? And can China come up with alternative to make up for the losses?
I think the direct possibility might be the steel sector and the auto parts sector. As far as the higher technology-based sectors, maybe intellectual property disputes might arise, and the 337 investigation might enhance. So in all those cases, China will also suffer. I cannot articulate to what quantity it will do. Still, that will pose difficulties to us.
All right, we're talking about what will be the implications. There is trade conflict between China and the United States when Donald Trump is sworn in. You're now watching Dialogue. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
On January 1st, CGTN, China Global Television Network, officially took over from CCTV News.
Hello and welcome to Global Watch.
Our mission, to link China and the rest of the world.
为世界经济注入新动力。
Telling China stories that no one else can. Telling stories that are often underreported. And covering events in a way to make a difference in a new age for discourse. News and features, business and sports, culture and entertainment.
China has been able to.
With commentary from a Chinese perspective, CGTN offers a strong alternative in global communications. CGTN. See the difference.
But there are also other people who are saying Trump administration might not be a bad thing for China. For example, the Chinese businessman Wang Jianlin and Jack Ma, Jack Ma already visited Trump, and Wang Jianlin is also planning to do so. They plan to create jobs for America, million jobs, Jack Ma said. And probably it's a good opportunity for Chinese business people to make more investment in America, creating jobs for middle class and small businesses, and also infrastructure. What do you think that the opportunities of Trump administration?
Well, certainly there is now, let's say, added incentive for Chinese businessmen and companies to make that argument that we are creating jobs for Americans. And if they can demonstrate that effectively, you're right. However, mentioning Wang Jianlin, it's already come under review, his investments in Hollywood. Currently Wanda controls AMC, which is a movie theater chain. Sorry. Anyway, he's already made substantial investments in the U.S., and those are now being scrutinized, is my point. So it's not just a matter of saying, hey, I'm creating jobs.
But Trump will give him an easier time to do that.
Well, if he's successful in convincing Trump of that, right? I mean, that's what it seems to be. We're not really sure of how Mr. Trump makes his calculations, but if he could be persuaded that indeed these are job-creating arrangements, then yes, you would think those would get support.
Mr. He, do you think the Chinese business people might have a better chance to invest in America?
Not a better chance. Still, I think if we have a greenfield investment instead of mergers and acquisitions, Donald Trump will certainly welcome, because they create jobs and tax directly. As far as mergers and acquisition is concerned, there will be more political handicaps ahead.
We have another guest joining us on the line. He is the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Arancha Gonzalez. Director Gonzalez, we've been talking about Trump's trade policy. In your opinion, what is going to be his trade policy? Is it going to be extreme, protectionist? And what does that mean for the rest of the world?
Well, I think it is a bit early to know what his policies will be. We know what we hear and what we read in the tweets, but we don't know what he's going to be doing.
What is your speculation?
I think he's a lot of speculation. I think he's right in saying that America needs jobs, that America needs better paid jobs. He's right on that.
But do you think a better trade deals can bring America more jobs?
If he goes to trade protectionism, that is not clear.
And Do you think better trade deals is possible and better trade deals will bring more jobs back to America?
I mean, the problem is not so much one of big unemployment. The American economy is running quite high unemployment. The problem is the quality of the employment. There is a hollowing out of the middle classes in America. And I think he's right in wanting to fix this. But the thing is that I'm not sure we are going to fix this through trade protectionism. We need better domestic policies, and we need to deal with the consequences of the job losses that come with technology. This will accelerate in the future. For that, education, healthcare, retraining, soft infrastructure is extremely important, much more so than obviously erecting protectionist trade measures.
But it seems some companies, transnational companies, either persuaded or coerced by Trump, has already decided to move back to their factories to the U.S. GM has done that, Ford has done that, Carrier has done that. Do you think more companies may follow suit and do the same?
Well, I mean, again, we have to distinguish what part is what is really happening and what part is what we are hearing say. Obviously, if we know that the president of the country likes saying that he brought jobs back to America, every company that is investing in America and would have invested in America in any way is going to say, please, President, see how good I am. This is the normal way politics work. But in my view, the most important thing to keep in mind is that jobs in Mexico today help create jobs in the US. Jobs in the US help create jobs in Canada. All these jobs are interlinked. So it's not doing jobs in America at the expense of jobs in other parts. It's improving the quality of American jobs, helping create jobs elsewhere. Why not also in those countries that are poorer? The 1 billion people have exited poverty in the last 15 years through trade, who are also wanting to come into these middle classes.
I also want your take on China-US trade relations. What do you think Mr. Trump expects China to do to give him a better deal in terms of trade?
Well, I think both China and the US have interest, they have a strong interest, in my view, in stabilizing their trade relationship, but also in working together to strengthen a rules-based trading system. I think the risk here is that we go into some sort of deals-based trading system, and we abandon the rules-based trading system that has been the bedrock that has led to America being as important and as economically strong as it is today, and that has led to China being part of the world economy, especially since its insertion.
But it seems in Mr. Trump's
the two countries
opinion,
can work together to make the
only rule
WTO
is
stronger.
that America first. America has to win everything. It must be very advantageous for Americans.
Well, I think there is an very advantageous deal in having Chinese companies invest in America and having American companies invest in China and keeping trade opening so that the investments they made on both sides of the Atlantic that create jobs can benefit from what these companies can do better in America and in China. It's what I call a win-win game.
Let's also talk about the possible leverages that Mr. Trump might have to let China do what he wants it to do. Do you think the value of currency is a leverage that Mr. Trump can use? He's talking down dollar so that it has better position in terms of trade. Will that work?
Well, not really. I mean, it's a simple answer. Yes, a strong dollar hurts American exporters, but harkening back to the points about 1980s U.S.-Japan trade, you know, when the Japanese experienced a huge appreciation in the yen, they went to higher value manufacturing, to a point I was earlier making. But you know, a higher valued currency, if you know how to work with it, you actually raise your economic power. And if America with a higher value dollar makes better quality products and ships them around the world, that's good. You don't need a low value currency to achieve that.
Do you think Mr. Trump's administration will come up with a currency war to follow up with the trade war?
First of all, it's regarding the dollar. They want to, Donald Trump certainly wants to bring down dollar, but I'm afraid whether he is able to do, because the Fed really plays the key role. And the Fed has to follow its own policy, independent policy.
But it seems Mr. Trump wants to meddle with Fed's decision already.
It's because Fed has to go ahead
because
with
it's just 1 year term
hike.
left for the Fed chairman.
But we can say that Yellen said, I don't want to take the second term, so whatever you say, you say, I don't care. Regarding the basic fundamentals, first, jobless rate is already 4.6, low enough. Inflation, 1.7, growing. So if it exceeds 2%, the Fed must have rate hike.
I also want your take, Mrs. Gonzalez. Do you think Mr. Trump will have any leverages to change the ideas of Fed in terms of currency problem?
Well, what I have seen in the past years is the Chinese currency appreciating, and this is part of the evolution of the Chinese economy and the Chinese economy working more according to market forces. So I am sure that they will keep this into account, as the IMF has kept it into account when it's done its last report on the evolution of the Chinese currency. So I am not sure what big game is to be achieved on that front. What we could see in the future is the US dollar strengthening further as a result of this big infrastructure investment plan that Donald Trump wants to achieve, which in my view will exacerbate the views in Washington about a potential trade deficit. But this, in my view, can be addressed cool-headed if the two sit together and if the two look more at investments, rather, as I said, rather than fighting each other through trade or monetary protectionist instruments.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Gonzalez. So in the coming year and coming 4 years, what is the worst scenario of economic transactions between the number one economy in the world and number two? What is the best and the worst?
Well, the best would be they work out things, like Ms. Gonzalez's comments there. They find a way to, I win, you win, we all do it. Win-win, as the Chinese like to say. Worst case is that breaks down, and you have increased frictions that could lead beyond the economic sphere into politics and maybe even military confrontation.
What is your take, Mr. Ho?
I think 2017 might be a difficult year in China-U.S. trade. There will be more frictions and more quarrels, and there might be a slight decrease in the trade volume. But 2018 might see an improvement, and both sides might come together and see more common grounds. And if we work well, 2019 and at the latest 2020, we'll see a rebound of bilateral trade.
Well, that's very optimistic prediction. What is your take? Which is more likely?
Ultimately, it seems with both economies, the Chinese and the U.S. economies, there's a lot of pragmatism that prevails, regardless of politics. And I like.
So you're saying the structure is still the byword.
I think there'll be some initial friction. I think Trump is going to find his way. I think he's going to feel compelled to act on his rhetoric, and then when that doesn't work, I think there'll be a return to rationality.
And you think Trump will come to rationality at last?
I think he'll be compelled to. He'll be forced to. I don't think he necessarily will intuitively come to that, but he'll see. He's a businessman. Right. He'll look for the best deal.
Okay. On that optimistic note, we have to end this edition of Dialogue. Thank you very much for watching. I'm still in Beijing. Goodbye for now.